Good afternoon and welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe, brought to you by Mike Lucy and of course John Rowe, our in-house resident storyteller. Over the next few weeks, if you've missed them already, please go back and listen to all the other amazing storytellers. Over the next few weeks there'll be loads more, so please do keep coming back. My name is Veronica Chambers. I'm a storyteller living in England, but originally from Ireland. So I'm going to tell you a few stories which I know from Ireland. And I'm going to start with a story about St. Bridget, the patron saint of Ireland. St. Patrick is also the patron saint of Ireland, but St. Bridget was slightly different. St. Bridget was born in Ireland to a Druid family. And as she grew up, she started to hear the stories about Christianity and she started to veer that way. She was an amazing woman. She helped all sorts of people, from lepers to people who were in isolation. And she took care of everybody that she could. Well, one day she was walking with her sisters through Leinster, an area where I'm from. And as she was walking around, she saw this beautiful green land, and she saw a beautiful river coming down, a beautiful lake to the side, and she said, "Sisters, this would be a good place to settle. Let's find out who the king of this land is." And that's exactly what she went and found out. The king of Leinster himself, the grumpy old goat. Well, she went and said, "King Leinster, you know what we're trying to do. We're trying to be good for the people here. Please give me some land." "Don't be silly," he said. "I'm not giving away land." "Oh, but please, do you know how good? We've seen how many poor people are in this area. We could help them." "I don't want to help them. All that money is mine," he said. And she finally turned round and said, "Would you give me just a small piece of land? As small as my cloak?" And she took off her cloak, and he laughed and went, "Huh, well, if that's all you want, you can have it." She asked each of her sisters to take a corner of the cloak, and that's exactly what they did. And they started walking, one to the north, one to the south, one to the east and one to the west, pulling the cloak larger and larger and larger until the time they'd covered all of Wicklow and all of Kildare. And the king of Leinster screamed, "Stop! Stop! That's almost all of my land!" And Bridget said, "But sir, you promised the land that would be covered by my cloak." And the king never forgot a promise. And he let her have that land. And as I said, that land had the beautiful stream going through it. A stream that not only goes up and down hills, but it goes all the way down to Dublin and becomes the River Liffey. The River Liffey, which serves the most amazing little brewery in the middle of Dublin city, called the Guinness Factory. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, if you see most nuns today, you will see that they wear black and white. I've told you that story because I've been missing my Guinness being in isolation. You know, a pint of the black stuff is always like not wanted. So instead I have my cup of tea, which isn't as interesting, but at least it's in a black cup. So, I was going to tell a few stories today, but I decided to tell some of my favourite old stories. So I'm now going to tell you a story of Philip, a young boy. When he was born, Philip sneezed. And that, of course, as you all know, is a sign of genius. Well, as soon as he sneezed, the mother and father were so proud of him. And for the next few years, everything he did. He learned how to read and write by the age of 6 months. He was so intelligent. Everything he did, he could speak, he could sing, he could remember half the alphabet by the age of 7 months. Well, when he was 7 years old, Philip went out for a walk and never returned. Everybody searched for him. The whole village, all the lowmen, all the knights looked for him, but he was nowhere to be found. The search went on, but slowly people started to get on with their daily lives and forget about his poor mother and father who'd lost their beautiful little son. Well, after another 7 years, Philip still hadn't been found. The mother and father were finally giving up hope. And on the 7-year anniversary, a young farmer boy from just down the road, who'd known them for many years, but had gone and trained. Sorry, I've forgotten the job that he did. He was a blacksmith. He'd trained to be a blacksmith. A young farmer boy who'd helped them search for years went and trained to be a blacksmith. Well, not only was he a blacksmith, also sometimes his dreams came true. And one night he had a dream of a big, white, glorious horse. And on top of that horse was a small young boy, which he instantly recognised as being Philip. And he said, "What am I dreaming? This horse is way too big for you." And Philip whispered, "Please come and get me. My time is done. I'm with McMahon, the giant." Well, the blacksmith went, "I've had dreams like this before and I know that they're not always true. How will I know this is true?" And with that, the white horse kicked him in the face and he woke up. He looked round and he felt that lump in his head. And he decided it must be true. He got out of bed. He went and picked up a plough iron. And he went and knocked on the door of Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy had always believed in his dreams. "Tom, I need your help. I need to go to the house of McMahon." Tom wasn't sure. He'd heard the stories, but who would want to go near there? But in the end, he was convinced by the full story and by the lump on the blacksmith's head. Well, off they went in a skiff, and they rowed across the lake, right to the edge of the cliff. And they sat there waiting, for everybody knew that it was only at midnight that you'd be able to see the entrance into the giant's cave. Well, the moon stayed up and it didn't seem to move. And the blacksmith started to think, "What fool am I? It was only a dream. It was only a dream. Maybe it should be time to go back." And as he thought this, Tom Clancy pointed. And he turned round and he saw this cave opening within the cliffs. And they rode forward. And the blacksmith walked out and he walked down a dark, horrible, dingy little walkway. And when he looked at the walls, it looked like there was faces in the walls. And finally, he saw a bit of light coming from the far end, and the moonlight just dying behind him. He walked forward and he walked forward until he was in a big, spacious room. And there were not hundreds, not thousands, but millions of children, all around the same age as Philip was when he was lost. He walked further into the room, holding tight to his plough iron. And suddenly he heard a booming voice. "What are you doing here?" It was McMahon the giant. "Well, what I've come for is Philip Ronayne. His time has come," said the giant. "But you can only have Philip if you recognise him from this crowd." As I said, there wasn't hundreds or thousands. There was millions of children. And he looked all around him, but didn't recognise a face he knew. So he started to have a bit of chit-chat with the giant. "You been here long?" "Centuries." "Ah, okay." He kept looking at all the faces. "Fine crew of children you have." All the children started laughing at his awful chit-chat. But as they did, he heard one voice shout, "It's me." And he looked round, and there he saw Philip Ronayne. And the giant was still involved in his chit-chat, and he went, "Oh yes, dear fellow, I agree. I've got very good-looking children. They work very hard for me. Normally 7 years at a time is their service. Let me show you some more." And he started pulling the blacksmith away, and the blacksmith held out the gridiron. So therefore, the giant did not take his hand, but he did take Philip. But Philip was able to pull away, and straight away the blacksmith and Philip were stood together. And he said, "This is Philip Ronayne." And all the children, not hundreds, not thousands, but millions, went, "Yes, it is! Yes, it is!" And the next thing that they remembered was sitting on Tom Clancy's boat. Well, the blacksmith was given great wealth for saving young Philip, and he lived happily ever after. But young Philip grew up to be a blacksmith himself, because he had learned so well as a 7-year-old child how to work with brass and work with metal. And he became the young blacksmith's apprentice, and they all lived happily ever after. Just having my little sip of black stuff. So, Ireland is very famous for its fairies and all sorts of mysterious beings going on, one of which is the puka. Now, some say that the puka is a fairy, and some say that the puka is not a good thing. But a beautiful woman called Wilde, the mother of Oscar Wilde, once wrote a story about a puka. And it was about a young man called Padraig this time. Paddy to his mates. Padraig one day was stood in the field, and he felt that gust of wind. You know, the one that gives you a thrill, a chill straight through. That was exactly what he had, and he knew what it was. "Puka, Puka, show yourself!" He didn't see anything, but a cow came up and started wiggling his tail right at him. And he knew that that was the puka showing himself. And he went, "Thank you, sir, thank you." The puka whispered back, "Meet me in the mill at midnight." Well, that was quite an unusual request, he thought, but he'd been out all day. He went home, he had his supper, and he went and waited for the puka in the mill. But he'd had a good supper, lots of potatoes, and after being out in the field all day long, after a while, he started to feel sleepy. And he saw all the workmen around him all sleeping as well, hearing them snoring and thinking, "Oh, that would be nice." And he started to let his eyes close. And he never saw anything at midnight. He did wake up with a start and remembered why he was there. And he looked round and he saw that all the corn had been milled. But it wasn't the workmen, because they were still snoring. Maybe it was the puka. Well, the next night was just a normal night until the following morning he walked into the mill, and yet again all the corn had been milled. So on the third night he went to sleep during the daytime so he could stay up till midnight. And he crawled inside a little crate and stayed up and waited and watched. And as midnight arrived, an old, scraggly man, looks a bit like John Rowe, walked in, and he stood and said, "It is time." And as he said that, loads of little fairies and pukas came in, and they all started to grind the corn. "Ah," said young Padraig, "now I know why he asked me." But he didn't say anything and he didn't do anything. But he looked at the old man's clothes, which were torn and faded. Well, in the end, he fell asleep. But the next morning, all the corn had been milled. Even probably more corn than they'd even gathered the day before. Well, they kept coming every night. In the end, Padraig's father let the men go because they had no work to do. And their family became rich. After a while, Padraig went, "Father, we've been getting rich from a puka. Maybe we should do something nice for that puka." And the father agreed, and they went down to the town and they worked out the measurements they thought the puka would be, and they got him a beautiful silk blue suit. And that evening, his father and Padraig sat in the barn house, laid out that beautiful blue suit, and waited to see the puka arrive. The puka walked in. His clothes were even more torn and more faded this time, because he'd been coming every night for a few years. And he looked down and he went, "A suit? A beautiful new suit? Is that for me? Oh, I must try it on. And he took off his old clothes and he put on his trousers and he put on the white shirt and felt already like a greater man. And then he put on the jacket and he put on the dicky bow and he looked round and he knew it was the perfect fit. He was happy as anything. All the fairies and pookas came in to do their work that night and he went, look at my new suit, how lovely is my new suit. And they went, yes, master, do you want us to do some work? And he went, no. I don't want to get dust on my new suit. I want to go and show my suit off. And he walked out of the barn and was never seen again. Well, Podrick and his dad saw everything. They weren't too upset because they already had riches. Podrick had already had an education and he was doing well for himself. The money they had left would do them. And they were happy that the puka had left with a beautiful blue suit. But not many years later, Podrick found a lady. And finally, it was time for them to marry. And on the night of the feast, Podrick, or Paddy to her, stood up to give his wife a toast and said, I'm so happy that I have such a beautiful woman to spend the rest of my days with. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to toast the bride. And as he reached down for his cup, instead of the glass cup he had there, was now a beautiful golden goblet. And he knew where it had come from and was not afraid to take a sip. And his wife had a sip too. And that goblet, still today, stays within their family. Cup of tea time. Hang on. Right, so you've been sat there for a while now. I don't even know how many minutes you've been sat there, but you have been sat there for a while now. So I think you should all stand up and do a little bit of exercise. You know, all this isolation isn't good for you. And so I'm going to give you a little story where we're going to walk around the world a little bit. It's okay because you can't see my legs, so you don't need to do much exercise. It's all going to be very, very simple. So you can shout out as well whenever you want. Once there was a man. He was American, so he was. And he was from the other side of the world. Well, he decided that he would like to go back and see his relatives in Ireland. So he went flying round the world and landed in Dublin. Well, when he arrived in Dublin, he saw the sights here and he saw the sights there. And then he went up the mountains. And then he went down the vales. And then he went all the way round, all over again. He finally met his cousins. All 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's Ireland. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 of them. And he said, oh, I cannot wait to see Great Granny. Who was he going to see? Great Granny. And all of them said, when you get there, don't eat the butter. Don't eat the butter. Why not? don't eat the butter. Well, finally he walked and 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 he went all the way to Great Granny's house. And when he got to Great Granny's house, she'd put on the most beautiful brown soda bread you'd ever seen in your life. Now, if you've ever eaten Irish brown soda bread, this was 10 times better than the one you've eaten. And the grandmother cut it up, and she 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 cut it up. And it was all there, freshly baked that morning and smelling so good. But you know what goes on a bit of Irish soda bread? Butter. And he could hear all 20 of them saying, "Don't eat the butter! Don't eat the butter! Don't eat the butter!" But that brown bread was so good. He got the butter and he spread it this way, and he spread it that way, and he spread it this way, and he spread it that way. And he ate as much as he could. Oh, that was beautiful bread, great-grandmother. Well, now you've been here for a while, would you come and help on the field? Of course, great-grandmother. So they went outside. You need to get ready for the buckets now. He carried a couple of buckets. They were empty. They were light. He went off with the buckets and they arrived at the cows. And he sat there and he milked the cow. He was not very good at this, so it ended up that the grandmother milked the cow. And the buckets were full. And he picked the buckets up and he walked, splashing milk all over the place until they stopped where the chicken and hens were. He put it down and the grandmother, great-grandmother, started putting out food, putting out food. Oh. Then the grandmother started washing the feet of the hens in the milk. Ah, it's very good for giving really good yellow eggs, she said. So he helped with this. No problem. Well, then he picked up the buckets and he walked on, and they weren't as full, but they were still full and they were quite heavy, and he wasn't used to all of this. But they got to the cats and the dogs and he put down the milk. Well, you know what the cats are like. They love milk. As soon as they smelt it, they went over and they lapped and lapped and lapped into the buckets. Oh. After great-grandmother had put the food out for all the dogs and the cats, they started to move on. And though the buckets were a little bit lighter, they were still heavy. And they carried and carried and carried and carried until they got to the donkey. He put the milk down. And the grandmother got a big sponge and she put it into the bucket. And she got another big sponge and she put it into the other bucket. And she started to clean the donkey with the milk. And she went, well, it's very hard to bring water all the way down here. And look how dirty the donkey's been, all with the veins and everything, all that dirt. And she dipped back into the butter, into the milk, and started rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. Well, finally, the work was done. And he brought the two almost empty buckets back the house. But finally, she went, "Sure, you might as well chuck all of that into one bucket. There's only one bucket's left worth," said great-grandmother. And that's what he did. He picked it that way, and he picked it that way, and it all went into the one bucket. And he left it outside, and she went, Gran, sure, we'll rinse out the clean bucket. And that's exactly what they did. Rinsed it all out, and it was ready to go again another day. And he said, "And great-grandmother, what will we do with the other milk?" And she went, "Sure, that's no good for a cup of tea. It's only good for the butter. And that's why you don't eat the butter." Right, well, I think I've got one more story left for you. Sorry, I'm just going to have tea. But I will just remind you that you're on the World Storytelling Cafe site. If you're on YouTube now watching it, go and check out the World Storytelling Cafe site. And thank you, Mike and Lucy, for all of this. If you do like me or any other tellers, right underneath us, just down there, is a little pot that you can chuck some money into to help all the tellers in this time where it's a bit difficult. I'm finally going to tell you a little story which I was told by an Eritrean. And I absolutely love this story. It's all about two young children. And these two young children, all they ever did all day long was be loud and boisterous and horrible. One of them used to break everything. The other one used to go, "Mom, he's broken my toy." The other one would run away and hide. "Mom, he's gone and hidden now." Well, the mother was Mother Earth. And she went, "If you two can't behave like children, you can be something else." And she turned them both into elephants. Well, one of the elephants would use his trunk and go and break the trees around him. The other one would go, "Oh, Mom, look what he's doing now." "Oh," said the mother, "if you two can't behave properly, I will turn you into something else." And she turned them into two lions. But the naughty lion would go round and just scratch things for the fun of it. Scratch the trees. Scratch, scratch. "Mom, he's still doing it. No matter what you do, he still does it." Well, the mother said, "If you two cannot behave yourselves, I will turn you into something else." And suddenly, there were two dung beetles. And the loud child was pushing and pushing the dung as much as she could, when the other one came up and climbed all over it, and it fell apart. "Mom!" "Oh, please, you two, you shouldn't just be shouting at each other. You two should try and get along. I will put you somewhere which hopefully will help you learn this." And with that, she put them into the sky. But the first child started chucking all sorts of things into the sky. Lightning. He worked out how to make fork lightning go everywhere. And all you heard from the other child was rumble, 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 rumble. Oh, first child had always been known as lightning. The second child, of course, thunder. And even to this day, they run around the world. Lightning always ahead of thunder. Thunder sometimes catching up, but sometimes having to fall back. But still shouting, "Mom!" But all we hear is a rumble. But that way, ladies and gentlemen, you will always know that the storm will pass. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed today and hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Did you enjoy that story? Of course you did. Like they said, if you want to put a contribution in, go to the hat beneath the story on worldstorytellingcafe.com. And, well, you remember the song, Buddy, can you spare me a dime? Well, I'm sure every storyteller would appreciate a little in the hat. I'm going to pass it round. Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam. That's most appreciated. Whoa! Oh, no, that is fantastic. Thank you. And even better. Ladies and gentlemen, that you have done just a little rattle there, just a little rattle, and my hat is nearly full, and that storyteller you've just listened to will eat for a few days because we're all stuck without being able to go out and perform. We love you all, and we love the fact that you've listened to the stories. And if you can afford it, buddy, can you spare me a dime?